Alex, Demirel, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Pleasure, David. Thank you for having me.
The reason I reached out to you, I actually introduced you to a recent host that you appeared with, Zach Villeneuve-Snell,
Yeah.
and he's fantastic. I was also a guest on his show. Really great host, given that he's only done a handful of episodes. I think he's got the skills and the etiquette and the talent for the future. The reason I put him in contact with you, I love his content, but I've loved your content and the content that you've featured on for like four or 5 years. About 4 years. When you've been like friends with Tom Stockton and Mo Samuels, I used to like watch all of those clips that you were featured in, and then followed the RET journey, and now you're self-employed doing it yourself. So this is really full circle that we're mates. I know.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I'll be asking for an autograph after this, mate.
Nah, no autograph from me, mate. I don't like fame. Better to have niche fame. Better to be known in your field.
100%. So in true development by David style, who is Alex Demirel today in 2022?
Good question. Well, at the moment, so I'm currently a health and performance coach. We help predominantly entrepreneurs optimize their health, eradicate their health issues so they can perform at the best, to remove that bottleneck. That's what I've been doing for the past year, and the past 6 months, it's really picked up. But before that, I mean, we're going past before 2022, but it's all kind of almost, we could do, I think, in some instances, we do full circle in life. I've always had this innate desire to always improve my health, and always like health is wealth and everything. And it started out in physical fitness, or fitness niche, like a lot of people, and now it's transpired to more peak performance, biohacking, as some people call it. And that kind of all that good stuff. So yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment, man. And life is good. I'm very grateful to be able to help people do this.
Why entrepreneurs specifically? Is there a tendency for entrepreneurs to negate or put a blind eye to some of these facets of life?
I would say so, David. I would say absolutely, because there's this notion, especially on social media, that's rife, that it should be rest till I'm dead mentality if you want to build a business. It's rise and grind, work, hustle, grind, baby, sleep is for the weak. And now what we're finding, and you've seen this popularized on all the podcasts and great researchers, that sleep is actually a superpower. Sleep is the one that the new age of entrepreneurs, they're sleep optimized. They're putting their sleep first over the business or late hours. And actually find that if you dial in your sleep and truly dial it in using something like an Oura ring, using scores and whatnot, you'll get ahead of the people who are working really, really hard, but they're fighting against the tide. They're on a ton of energy drinks, caffeine, and they think, oh yeah, I'm putting in the hours, but you don't get credit for working hard. You get credit for working smarter, so it's how you use your tools. So we come in and say, look, it's great that you've got the ambition that you want to work hard. Your business is your baby. I'm the same, but you need to know when to take a rest. And you need to learn that, your me time is your biggest ROI. I think it's that in Zach's podcast, but that's one step back. It's 10 steps forward. Start thinking in terms like that, and start feeling so guilty as well for having downtime, because being lazy is productive in the sense that if it helps you, get into a place in which you can then traject yourself further, then that's a great thing, right? So entrepreneurs, like, I never started out like this, obviously, but we've seen a gap there. It's like, because I myself have started my own online business, and I was just tied to my desk. I was skipping on the gym. I was up late. I wasn't even like getting dressed. It was just in my boxers straight, because I had like 30 clients at the time. So I was just tied to my business, and I had a business, but really my business was running me. But I had pride. I was like, yeah, I'm a business owner. But that's nothing really to boast about, because I'm trading my health for wealth. And so I realized there was a better way with some of the clients that were coming to me as well for the fitness. They were entrepreneurs, and they were looking to improve their health so that they can focus more, actually, so that they can work for longer without burnout. So then, the light bulb started to go off, and I started to do my own research, my own books, courses, mentors. And then the proof is in the pudding as well for me. Like, when I put my health first, I started to have record-breaking months in my own business. And so for me, that was really like solidified that you need to like spread awareness of this. And actually, it's a bit of a fallacy to think the harder you work, the more you get out. It's also, you need to know when to push and think of it as a round of sprints, not just a marathon of like just grunting out work and caffeine, and be a bit more systematic about things, or methodical.
What I like about that, and I'm so glad that you've been so generous with that revelation that you had once you improved your own life, you felt a need to share it with others. But one thing that stood out for me was sleep. We this kind of new age of productivity where we fetishize toxic productivity, like the whole Gary Vaynerchuk approach of like 25/8, sleep 4 hours a night, etc., etc. Even if we do that to optimize more time, I think Matthew Walker says something along the lines of those who sleep less in order to feel like they're awake more to do more actually live a shorter lifespan. So they're actually being counterproductive in
Yeah,
some way. But not
yeah,
only that, if you have poor sleep, your waking moments of the day will be less enjoyable because you'll be in a state of fatigue. And like we all, I think the listeners will all know like how great they feel when they've slept 8 quality hours versus 6 poor hours. They know how different their day just ambiently feels. So
mhm.
even if you do have more of your day because you sleep less, the hours within that day will feel horribly worse.
Yeah,
I think we get too stuck up on trying to improve our lives that we forget to live it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What's that phrase? There's a Stoic phrase. It's like, oh, is it Alan Watts about trying to, you get, there's a phrase where you bang on the money though about you get
I
so
think that's
consumed,
Alan. I think it is Alan Watts.
you're
Phrase
so
that,
consumed
that last
with
one.
improving your life that you all forget to live it. Yeah, it's a great quote.
So you mentioned the term biohacking, and this is kind of your niche or area of expertise. What does biohacking mean?
Yeah, so there's several definitions of this if you ask a different person. But to me, biohacking, you can have it can have in one sense a negative connotation because people think you are, in a sense, hijacking your biochemistry, which is not the case. You're just maximizing for what it's already designed to do using your environment and certain, perhaps maybe supplements or dosages of ingredients from foods, right? But to me, biohacking is about getting the most out of your biochemistry. It's not necessarily about being hooked up to an IV machine and then being fed all the perfect nutrients, because then I always say to clients as well, if you were hooked up to a machine that gave you the best nutrients, everything, the perfect time, the sleep and everything was great, but you're not living your life also at the same time. So that is also not a life worth living either, like to be at that other end of the spectrum. So I think some biohackers can take that to the extreme, so we do try and distance ourselves a little bit like that, but you could definitely fall in the subcategory of biohacking of what we do. You'll see people with blue light blocking glasses, but this isn't really, we're not really hacking anything here. We're just putting an orange lens in front of our eyes to avoid the blue light. If you want to call that biohacking, sure. But to me, it's more about manipulating your environment to get the most out of your physiology.
One thing that I've heard you speak about, and it's something that I deeply agree with, is using pain as a motivator. And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is instead of pursuing pleasure, just avoid pain. And I guess this journey must have stemmed from a place of pain for you, Alex. Surely that you had some sort of negative symptoms in your life that you had to run away from or you changed.
Yeah.
What was life like before this movement for you or this progression for you?
Yeah, good question, man. So I started, I have a YouTube video coming out next week for this big 12-year transformation. So you probably just better watching that. But for the time being, I started out 15. Most people wasn't happy with my physique. I wasn't the popular kid in school. I got a little bit bullied. So I wanted to improve my self-esteem. Joined the gym, got some results like most people do. Clueless, but I persevered, and then I got recognized for it. So I just ran with it. I really went all in with the gym, like kind of obsessive, just all in. And at the time, there wasn't much knowledge on nutrition or anything. There wasn't any if it fits your macros. It was all bro science. So wasted a lot of years, but had a really good passion for it. So through that, during that time, man, I was always having like these episodes of like brain fog or, very hyperactive kid, couldn't sit down for longer than a minute, labeled, ADHD. And when I was also trying to launch my own business as well, I just couldn't sit down and do the work. I know what I needed to do, but I just can't focus. I'm always getting, distracted. And it wasn't that I found out that, this is actually related to my sleep, my inability to focus, even though I sleep great. I self-report, I sleep great. And a lot of clients do when they come to us like, how's your sleep? I'm like, oh, it's fine. Yeah, I sleep really good. And it's like, well, you use an Oura ring? Oh, no, but I know I sleep well. And it's akin to saying I have money in the bank without checking your balance. You just don't know until you check. So it was the same for me, that awakening of not just looking at food as macronutrients, but how is it affecting your gut health? Because you know that the bacteria in your gut has a direct effect on how you think, feel, and your overall mood. And for me, I was having like not episodes, but almost bipolar in some instances when I was a teenager. Could have been hormonal, but I also think it was due to my diet as well. And that led me on a journey of trying every single diet there was: keto, carnivore, the 1 meal a day diet, extended fasting, cleanses. I tried everything. And it's all led me back, ironically, to like just a happy medium, I find, is the best diet depending on the person. But yeah, I had the main thing for me was the brain fog and inability to focus. And I was like, am I just genetically, just supposed to be like this? It wasn't until I read a book called The Ultra Mind Solution by Mark Hyman, and he gets some people will say like he's a bit of a pseudoscientist, but I really liked his whole message of how food can really affect your chemistry of your brain, omega-3s and whatnot, and certain vitamins. And it really opened my mind to like, hang on, this is not just a piece of broccoli. This can literally affect, how you're able to focus, right? So then I started taking food a lot more serious. And then I noticed a direct effect on how clean I was eating, like most people say, to how I was performing as well. So that really made me go deeper into it, into gut health, into supplements, into how you, structure your meals throughout the day. Is there any benefits of fasting for focusing? All these things. And then I found slowly but surely that, these things do work and you can actually change. You're not just doomed to what you think is ADHD. I honestly think when people self-report they have ADHD, I think it's a combination of phone usage and also just our poor lifestyles. We're training our brains to be ADHD with TikTok. That's one way to do it, is like constant attention swapping to certain tasks. So I think you're a product of your environment, and I was like getting down to the nitty-gritty of how's my environment affecting me, because I noticed a direct effect on my chemistry, my ability to focus. That's where my pain came from, I guess you would say, David.
Alex, I love that response. You've given me so many different golden threads that I can pull on to start a conversation. And I guess the first one I want to talk about is consumption. You spoke about food and how that affects your ability to concentrate and think clearly. And we spoke about the vagus nerve. I'm sure that's a nerve that connects the stomach to the brain. It's what creates is it the gut brain connection?
The gut brain axis.
Yep, 100. Yeah, yep, that's the one. And people don't understand that stress on the gut actually can create stress on the brain. Your stomach's a muscle like any other muscle that you have, whether it's your bicep or your tricep. If you were to train biceps for 12 hours a day, then you would never give it the space to repair and do what it needs to do. It's the same with the gut. If you're snacking all day on crap, your body, the muscle has been stimulated all day long, and that's why fasting is so important. But also, consumption can span more than just food and intake, but also the people you surround yourself and the content that you consume. And that's what you kind of alluded on to with TikTok. And I guess why I'm trying to bring this full circle is that from what I've seen of you over the last 3 or 4 years, what I've admired about you is that you're a non-conformist and someone who's viciously themselves, and you've put yourself out there online to be criticized. And I mentioned a couple of names up front, Mo Samuels and Tom Stockton, who seem to have been instrumental in your journey. However, what you guys have done from such an early age is against the status quo of someone or a teen from Britain. I want to know, where did that journey start for you to put yourself in the public eye and kind of disengage from the stereotypical British teen?
Yeah, good question again. I guess it kind of starts where I was at one point I was depressed, right? Okay, we'll take it back to here. I was depressed. I felt I was moving back home from my job in London, corporate job, and I got fat, out of shape, depressed, and I managed long story short, I pulled it back. Okay, and then Mo actually called me at one point, and this time I actually answered because I wasn't too depressed. And he basically proposed that, look, man, why don't you move out and come to Plymouth and start this business, RET at the time. And at that moment, I said yes. But then afterwards, your brain will start catastrophizing of what's going to possibly go wrong, because you're leaving your comfort. So remember, we're risk averse, we're pain averse, we're motivated by pain. So then I start catastrophizing of, what if it goes wrong and I run out of money and I have to come back and the business is going to fail and I'm going to embarrass myself and blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, stop, that's your monkey mind, that's your brain sabotaging you right now. And just, break it down, a cost benefit analysis or the functional analysis, and be like, what's the pros and cons here to what happens, right? Worst case scenario, everything fails, I move back home exactly where I am, exactly where I am, right? Okay, cool. We know then logically that your brain's playing tricks on you. So even though I was still, even after a few days, wanted to say, no, I'm good, I'm going to try this, I'm going to do my online coaching up here or north, I was like, fuck it, we'll just go for it, right? And so we committed to about $1,000 to my name, moved down, and then obviously COVID hit and all that stuff, but we still made it work, long story. And then that's where I got to where I am today. So I guess that was like the pivotal point in which I was like, right, well, I guess there's no return in terms of doing the initial plan, working in a gym and stuff. And I already done the corporate job for a good few years in London, marketing, and I've just never been cut out for having a boss. I knew I didn't want to have a boss. Don't know if that was ego or if I was just too young, but I just hated having someone reply to. And I think you can be very much happy in a corporate job, and hopefully, I'm sure you're happy, but not hating on it at all. But for me personally, I just couldn't have that structure and the hierarchy and the games that I had to play to work my way to the top. So I was always quite resentful of that and just never really tried my full efforts towards it, because to me, it was like, if I worked really hard, I was invisible to the boss, and he would only notice my hiccups, my short hiccups, and highlight them, and it would annoy me. So then I was like, well, to me, if I work really hard on my business, the only person I'm cheating is myself if I don't work hard. And I always almost get a direct output from my input. So that was very easy for me to make that link and be like, okay, I definitely want to work for myself. I'm just not sure what. I've always been into health. So the stars kind of started to align in that sense. We moved out, we had RET, it was kind of mindset focused of young lads trying to bring themselves up and be the best version of yourself, which I absolutely stand by. I think we really need that. And I guess at that point, it was like the online coaching was going well. And then Mo was obviously on YouTube, and that inspired me to get on the camera and get comfortable, because it is a skill as well. People think they can just pick up a camera and start a YouTube channel or Instagram. The amount of outtakes you probably want to see of me in the beginning, like just repeating words, and same with Mo and Tom, like it's hilarious, and people get beat up themselves and like, I'm just not made out for this. Like if you just persist, eventually your brain gets used to it. But at that point, for me, it was like, I never want to go back to my old job or my old life, because I realized also being around these people like Mo makes you also, and Tom, makes you see that you can do these things, right? You're a product of your environment, including the people, I'm sure you've heard. So for me, that was setting my self-limiting beliefs and just being around people. And also Instagram also helped as well. That was instrumental in that, and the fact that I knew there were other people out there who were doing things, being self-employed and making their own way. And I was like, if they can do it, why not me? So I'd given the corporate job a good go for 5 years, but it just wasn't working for me. So I was like, I'm going to make this work. And that's actually why I have the neck tattoo. Not everyone's a fan, but that's actually why I got that on the day that I became fully self-employed. I was like, I'm never going back to employment. So I wanted that stamp to be like, they're not going to take me, even if I want to go back into the corporate office to like, get out of that. So that's actually partially why I got that tattoo as well. And you'll notice I got that about 2 years ago. So that's where we're at now at the moment. So that's when I knew like there's no going back really. I mean, I'm sure that nowadays it might let you back in, but I'm sure a lot of jobs will probably snub the nose. So for me, that was very, very pivotal.
Oh, I love that forced accountability there, Alex. That's like the most in tune Alex action I've ever heard in my life to do something like that. I love it. What were the instant reaction of those around you from maybe your hometown or your family when you decided to leave a kind of stable, secure, comfortable 9 to 5 and take the leap? And
Yeah,
how does that compare to the reaction now?
yeah, of course, man. Like your parents just want safety for you. They will always pick the safest option for you. Stay in the job. I know you hate it, but just see it through. It pays well. Come on. And even when I quit my job, my mother was like, "Don't go spending your savings because that would be gone." And I actually wish I would have, because it would have kept me proactive and kept me doing things and picking a direction. And instead, I picked no direction because I was like, "Oh, I don't want to lose money." So in that sense, well, obviously your parents want the best for you, and that's fine. But I think sometimes it can bottleneck you, and only you know what's best for you. Sometimes, I mean, obviously, listen to people's opinion and stuff, and don't be naive. But I think deep down, everybody knows what's best for them as long as you give it a good enough amount of time of thinking. So I think initially they were a bit apprehensive, but they were very, very supportive. And then ultimately, I think that, to be honest, now, man, they're pretty neutral about it. It's just like the standard of me being self-employed. But I think in the beginning, my mother was quite worried, and she was like, "Don't worry, you always have like a bird's nest to fly back to." But yeah, at the beginning, they were a little bit don't do that. But then I was like, well, it's either give it a go and fail and come back where I am, or never try at all. And I'd rather give it a go and be like, do you know what? I tried. At least I tried, and I'll go back to my job, and I won't be resentful because at least I tried, right? So that's where they stood on that. Was initially quite, risk averse, but eventually they come around to it, and yeah, they trust me now.
I love that, Alex. I had a gentleman that reminds me quite a lot of you in terms of the way you think, called Josh Terry. You might have
I
seen
know.
his TikToks before. He does this it's a very unique kind of side-on view that he has in all these TikToks. And we were speaking about how we shouldn't aim for happiness, but aim for regret minimization.
Okay.
And I guess what would have hurted you more is not the concept of starting whatever endeavor you you wanted to flirt with and failing, but in fact never trying it at all. I think at the age of 60, you would have looked back and a fulfilled life would have been one with these ups and lows, and instead of just kind of nihilism where you have blue pilled yourself into a corporate career, never tried the online coaching business or whatever your next endeavor might be. I'm sure this won't be your last. And similarly, you might have seen on my Instagram, I did a stand-up comedy course and did a stand-up comedy gig because I've always wanted to try it, because I've always enjoyed watching it. So I thought, what would 6-year-old David say to me right now? Well, he would say, David, try it. If no one laughs, then that's fine. But at least you can say you've done it and you have a feedback loop to implement to your next move. And I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you embody that as well, Alex. I think you are the embodiment of that, if anything.
Thank you, man. No, I think it's better to have tried than never tried at all, and not to get philosophical, but eventually one day we're all going to be dead, and we care too much about the opinion of others, and that just so many times just affects you in negative ways. And it's like, you need to remember that people are too, on one aspect, people are also worried about, right, the opinion, which then affects, obviously affects you from doing a certain behavior or action, putting yourself on camera. But then I also remind myself, whenever that is the case, that if you walk down the street and you watch those people who are like street performers and you think, God, I could never sing in the street, that's so embarrassing, right? And they're going for it, they're belting out, fair play to them. 5 seconds later, you walk around the corner. Are you thinking about them? No. We're self-centered creatures. There's that spotlight effect that everybody thinks if you trip in public, everybody's staring at you. Not really. Maybe a few people, and they forget and they laugh. That's it. And it's the same with trying things like you did with the comedy club. Like if no one laughed and it was abysmal and you got booed off stage, fine, okay, horrible in the moment. But eventually, people would forget. People wouldn't be like talking about that tomorrow or the next day. And it's people are too self-centered. People have their own things, and I think if people realize that more, to be like, just go for it, just send it, because I'd rather do that than be an NPC and be worried about what people are worrying about me. I always call them NPCs, people who are just kind of like cruisers through life, and they're just like worried about, oh, what will they think, and I'll just keep my head down and I think just go for it, man. As long as you're not hurting anyone, send it.
I love the NPC analogy. Am I right in saying an NPC is like a non-playable character in a video game? Like if you're playing Grand Theft Auto, it's the people in the background that respawn and respawn and respawn, and they're not active. Am I right? Is that what it is?
Yeah. That's a big deal. That's big. They say the same scripts over and over again.
Oh, I love it. And the thing is, you're so right. People are so consumed in their own life that they will never pay attention to the downfall of your own life. And I think what people have a misconception of is the usage of mobile phones. Right? We're told that we all have surveillance systems in our pockets, being our camera on our phone, and we see videos online on TikTok of people doing embarrassing things and people filming it, and it getting published and getting millions of plays and people laughing in the comments. But realistically, we actually probably overestimate how often that actually occurs. And I guess it's some. Have you heard of survivorship bias?
Yeah, with the plane and the bullets.
So that's a form of survivorship bias. We can only see online the failures of others because they have been published.
For sure.
But that's only a decimal point of the actual failures that actually occurred in silence. But because we can only look online and see the ones that have been published online, we think if we're going to do something embarrassing, then it's going to be filmed and it's going to be uploaded. But that's just not the case. And I think the bias of people assuming that people are going to record them, I think that probably deters people from trying anything at all at times.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah. But again, I think the one thing that really helped me is if I'm providing value, I'm not doing it for anyone else. And if it can really, like cliche as it is, if it helps one person, I'm fine. And I'll get negative comments. I'll get people trolling. I'll get people saying, I don't know, like I'm a snake oil salesman or something, or I don't know what I'm talking about, or that's not, that's misinformation about Teflon pans we recently had. And that's fine. You've got your opinion. I'm happy to back it up with some studies. But well, the great thing you can do on social media, and I think a lot of people forget this, is you can just block. Like, oftentimes I'll just block. If someone's trolling me, I won't entertain it because I'm like, I'm too busy for this stuff. I'm not giving this guy or person, girl, any more energy. I'm letting them win by giving them a response, because they must be in a bad place to go out their day and type that, right? They mustn't feel very good about their life, unless I'm putting out something that's really that is genuine, like, just not backed up and dragging someone else down. But for me, it's like I'll never leave it. I've never left a negative comment on any social media platform. For me, as a person, it's just not like me. But I also think it's because I don't. What use is that to me, right? So for someone to do that to you, say if you were to embarrass yourself online, the more often not you'll find that it's kind of like hate only comes from below. Like that person must be in not such a great place. So I'll either just ignore them if they persist, or just block them. And I think that can also be a great, I know it sounds obvious, but it's a great tool for when you get online. It's like, look, if I don't like the comments and I'm actually trying to help people, or the content I'm putting out is, it's in some sense valuable. Maybe it's funny or something. But you get the odd guy who's like, oh, that's so embarrassing. Like, I remember you from your hometown. Like, why are you doing that? Block. Simple as. I think that's a good way.
Just like food is energy, communication can be energy. The communication that you receive, positive and negative, affects your energy.
Like you said,
Similar to food. So if you're getting negative commentary and it's not creating value to your next move, then of course it's a solid advice, Alex, just to mute it or block it or whatever else. I love it.
yeah, it's just like the environment. It's like you said about relationships or friendships or something. Like, things can be toxic, and if someone's not serving you in the way that, not serving, but if someone's dragging you down, or as an energy vampire is not good for your state, or your energy, or your overall mood, then limit yourself or block them. And it's the same online. If you're watching someone online, or if they're leaving comments on you, just block them or limit it, because you've got to really protect that state, because that affects how you perform and how you see the world. Of course, reality is neutral. It's just how we see things.
I love it, Alex. You don't heal in the environment that makes you sick. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I love the quote of ordinary people get ordinary results, extraordinary people get extraordinary results. I'd say you are an extraordinary person with extraordinary routines and habits. You're a man that seems to practice what they preach. Can we break down your morning and evening routines and unpick why you do each activity?
Okay, so first of all, it's 10 affirmations followed by half an hour meditation, and then a 45-minute ice bath.
Legit?
No, absolutely not. And this is my pet peeve of, it's a misconception as well. People think I'm not the biggest fan of actually morning routines. I'm the biggest fan of minimum effective dose. So from the moment I wake up to the moment I need to get my first task done, how much of that can I minimize to the point that it doesn't negatively affect my performance? So, if we're wanting to do what's the reason we do a morning routine? It's to feel a certain way. Or to go and do a certain thing. For most people, it's productivity, because they want to be able to, whatever it is, the job, business. But I find doing all these elaborate morning routines is actually kind of like passive or like active procrastination. Okay, so you're doing these things, and I'm not like, I meditate and I journal and stuff, but I use it as a tool. And I also think it's quite fragile to think, oh God, I haven't done my 1 hour morning routine. I can't do this work. It's just fragile, right? So to me, I would rather have all those tools at your arsenal, but make it a minimum effective dose. One thing, maybe two things. For me, it's nothing crazy. Like, even though I'm a health performance coach or peak performance or biohacking, whatever you call it, get outside first thing in the morning as quickly as you can and just move your body. That already ticks a lot of boxes in terms of you're doing something for your mind. You're allowing your mind to reflect and think, obviously, hopefully with no phone. And also I would recommend with no podcasts. A lot of people are always like, consume information. We don't have an issue with not enough information. It's trying to, understand it and store it where appropriate. So just stop with the podcast for one moment and just watch what comes up from your subconscious if you were just to go for a walk without that podcast in the morning. And you'd be surprised by what kind of thought patterns you have and how you catch yourself. Oh, I'm thinking about that negative thing again. Oh, yeah. And people don't do this enough. And I think it's why also people have an issue with sleep. They suppress these thoughts and stuff with podcasts and things to do in YouTube in between breaks. And even when you go on the toilet, you're on the fucking toilet, with your phone, playing a game or something. And it's like, just let your mind breathe. And the only time you actually really get to do that is when you go to lie into bed. And of course, all these thoughts that you've been suppressing all day bubble up and it's, I can't sleep, all these thoughts. Well, no shit. You haven't allowed your mind to kind of depress, right? So for me with the morning routine, man, it's super simple. Just get outside within the first 60 minutes of the day. We know that is paramount towards what we call syncing your circadian rhythm for energy, and then obviously for sleep as well later in the day. Getting outside, exposing yourself to blue light, and then it'll be about 15 minutes, 20 minutes of a nice brisk walk with my girlfriend Amy, and then after that, it's having a decaf coffee. I don't like to have coffee personally. I find that I'm actually more focused and less erratic and less anxious and stuff without coffee. But I will use it sparingly throughout the week if I have a really busy day and I'm not training that day, like in the gym. And then it's just getting to the first task. But really, my morning routine starts in the evening. It's more about the evening routine for me. I'm actually big on evening routines. So if you were to ask me, like, how is your evening routine? That is actually, I wouldn't say elaborate, but that's definitely got some structure. I would recommend doing nothing more than 3 things. Otherwise, you're not going to stick to it. 2 things, ideally. I mean, if you could do 1, that's great. But for me, it's performing a shutdown routine or a brain dump. So planning my day the night before, just an hour before, to make sure roughly, where are things going to be. I use Todoist for that. And then I'll just write down anything on that Todoist. If anything in my head or any thoughts, ideas and stuff, and notes, get that brain dump going so I'm not in bed thinking about it. And it's not an unclosed loop, trying to close that loop. And then I will literally, some nights, honestly, man, I'm human, I will go and watch a documentary with Amy. But what we will do, I'll put on my blue light blocking glasses. And I know they're not cool. And we'll put the TV brightness on the lowest because it's also the intensity of the light that affects your melatonin. So I'll do that. Not every night, of course, but most of the time it is reading a book as well or meditating as well. I like to meditate in the evenings, really helps. So even just a hot shower. I like to have a 1 hour gap at least minimum before I go to bed to allow me to come through the gears. Similar to how you come up to a junction in the car. Just slam it into first. Hopefully, you bring it through the gears and slow down the speed. Same with your evening routine. For you Americans, maybe listening to this, you probably can't relate, but UK people and whatnot, you'll know what I mean. So that's what I would say, man. As the evening routine is the key. The morning routine, I think minimum effective dose, just whatever gets you into that zone. And for me, it's just getting outside, walk, and then I'll maybe put some binaural beats as well whilst I work for 1 hour work block using this bad boy. So I'll just put that timer on.
What's that called?
Dude, I've made this company should pay me because I've made I refer this so often to all my clients and people on my Instagram story. Where is that timer from? That's so cool. It's just literally on Amazon, type in kitchen cooking timer and you'll probably see it for like £15. But just something about having an analog rather than, you could use a digital timer, but there's just something about having analog that makes it much more easier to do or enticing, right, to actually stick to the behavior. So, and a bit more rewarding, right, of getting those 2 blocks in each time. I do 50 minutes, Pomodoro technique, classical. So that's roughly what I do, man, if that makes sense.
Love it. Alex, I'm playing absolute post-it note rain with everything that you've just said there. So I'm going to try and backtrack and kind of unpick some of the facets that you brought to life. And one thing that stood out there, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you must have read Getting Things Done by David Allen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
because I can hear so much of that book being implemented in your life, including the kind of brain dump and closing loops, using Todoist to kind of track your items. One of my favorite quotes by him is, "The brain is for having ideas, not storing them."
Exactly.
And that goes back to your kind of initial point of people waking up in the morning, shoving on a podcast, distracting themselves, and constantly living in what seems like a productive distraction.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a tweet the other day that is probably my own medicine that I need to take. And I wrote down, mindfulness could create more entrepreneurs. We live in a world of aggressive productivity with bouts of distraction. and we're not giving ourselves the permission to think of how our lives could be different, or how our worlds could be different, or how the world could be different. And I think that's very true. I think, especially TikTok culture, you'll see so many people these days, almost like a verbal tick, almost like a Tourette syndrome, recite something they've seen on TikTok, whether it's a dance or a kind
Yeah.
of idiosyncrasy, or it's a kind of line or song. And I think when overthinking is not a problem these days, it's actually underthinking. They're not consuming their own thoughts,
Mhm.
and everyone's kind of conforming into the same thought patterns. And it's only people like you and I who are doing things differently, and doing things like this where we're learning in public. Like, you and I are not leaning on notes right now. You and I are dancing together to create something into existence that wouldn't have existed unless we came together. And I think underthinking is like a pandemic these days, or an epidemic. And
Yeah.
I think over people say, oh yeah, but at night I'm overthinking. That's because you're not thinking for the rest. Like, you're not thinking for
Right.
the 8 hours before that. You know.
Yeah, you put it well. It's like people, nobody are original thinkers anymore. It's all just an echo chamber, like Twitter and whatnot. Like everybody's a philosopher and then trying to put these profound quotes. And it's like, if you actually just sat and cut out the noise and give it a good, if you were to do like some kind of retreat, I'm not saying you should do this, but take this principle here. If you were to go to a retreat and isolate yourself, I think it'd be quite profound, like what would bubble up to the surface, and that would be truly original and what you have thought about with your own subconscious that puts things together, rather than, like you said, just echoing what everyone else is saying and what the trend is and what's new. And like maybe it's Alex, like at the moment it's like Alex Hormozy and stuff, like the kind of that stuff's very popular, right? And everyone's starting to do Alex Hormozy's esque videos, and it's like there's no originality anymore. And I understand it's normal for like people to be inspired or copy each other, like you see car companies do it. But I think there's a lot to be said for trying to really uh, play to you, and just being original in that, because obviously no one can imitate you. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, man, that you mentioned about the overuse of information. It's just we're inundated with the amount of, especially YouTube is massive. Like, it's endless. Like, how many times have people been in the endless loop at 4 a.m. just scrolling on the weird side of YouTube, just because, one, the addiction, but also the information that you feel like there's never enough.
I spoke in a recent solo podcast about a framework I use. I use it typically when understanding my own mental health status or homeostasis. I kind of try and use a mental model of intent or distract. So when I'm doing anything, am I doing it with intent, or am I doing it with distraction? Like you said, YouTube is limitless. You
Mm.
could consume 24 hours per day of watching YouTube. Every time I touch my phone and go on social media, and for example, if I watch one of your videos, or I watch one of my mates' or video reels, or if I look at a random girl's Instagram post, I need to question myself: am I doing this with intention to get something at the end of it, some sort of serotonin release because I'm gaining a reward from it? Is it helping me move me to my next step, or am I doing it to distract myself from the things that I need to do to move myself forward? And I think it's such an easy framework. Once you think that way, you can't unthink that way, and then
Yeah.
you start red pilling yourself into life.
Yeah, that's like mindfulness. It's like mindfulness practice. So for me, when I noticed a big benefit of meditation was I was starting to notice repeating thought patterns of maybe like negative self-talk. And I was like, there we go again. Like, you're beating yourself up about the past that no one gives a fuck about. And I was able to break that cycle. And then that helped me, go on then to achieve better things, right? And stop beating myself up. So like you said, what was that mental model that you used on a scale of 1 to 10 of distraction or
Just
present?
intent or distract.
Yeah, yeah, that's really good in terms of, even it winds me up, man. Like, even people who are, let's say you have lunch and you have this amazing meal here, tastes awesome, right? You're getting a ton of dopamine, you should be super grateful, and we're not even present doing that. We have to have the laptop up and watch something whilst we're eating, and it's like, mate, like, if there's a worse way to wire your brain, I don't know if you couldn't do any more, and it's like, or just try to be present. Like, for me, when I'm eating as well, we always have, like, there's no phones, there's nothing, like, just be present and just really try to enjoy it, because one, that's going to train your brain as well in terms of appetite regulation, but also in the sense you derive more pleasure because you're more present. And I think, yeah, like you said, people really need to be people aren't aware that they're being hijacked. Their attention is being hijacked, and they're on cruise control, and they're not even being. The more present you are, like the more present I have been, the happier I've been. There's almost like a correlation with that. There was one time where I did, in one of the last lockdowns, I did an hour of meditation for 30 days, right? Just to whatever, push myself, right? And as I was meditating for an hour, we're about like the 40-minute mark, and you get into this state of which you are like observing your thoughts, and you realize you are not your thoughts, and it's so trippy, and it's so quite profound. And I remember thinking, like, when have I ever done this in my, at the time, 27 years of being conscious, right? When have I ever just sat with my thoughts for a whole entire hour uninterrupted? Never, ever, right? And there's quite a few like insights to gain from that, of really, like, you really realize how erratic your mind is, how like your mind is always just wanting something, especially in this day and age, just like trained to always seek out information, or like we're bored, or so to sit there and train your brain to be there for an hour is obviously challenging, but at the same time quite insightful as well to how your brain works. And you realize that you almost have no control over your thoughts. You can't really predict what's coming up next. It just happens. So to kind of almost be conscious of that is quite surreal. And yeah, like you said, if you are even just washing the dishes and stuff, or being a bit more present, you'll find that you're just noticing your state and noticing what you're doing often is a great antidote for things like anxiety and overthinking.
I love that personal anecdote. My listeners might be bored of me saying this. I think I've said it a couple of times on a podcast before, but I like to view mindfulness like apples on a tree.
Okay.
So some apples are good, some apples are rotten, and without mindfulness, the apples fall as and when they please. Mindfulness is, or meditation is, like having a ladder and being able to go up on the ladder and pick what apples you want to pick, good ones or bad ones.
Yeah.
And that premise came to me when I was on a flight a couple of years ago, Alex. My phone died, and it was like a 2-hour flight, not even that long, or an hour and a half flight from London to Glasgow, which probably feels like you're going back in time 50 years because Glasgow is so far in the past. But my phone had died, and it was the most uncomfortable 90 minutes of my life because I had to face the thoughts that I had been distracting myself for the last week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and I hated every minute of that 90 minutes.
Yeah.
And that forced me into meditation. And what came out of the other side of that after, I don't know, 8 or 12 weeks was I remember vividly waking up to the sound of roadworks outside my house. And I realized that at that moment, the sound of the roadwork didn't longer annoy me. Like, the sound of birds tweeting and the sound of roadworks are both just noises. But we would love to be woken up by the sound of nature, but hate to be woken up by the sound of roadworks. But they're just noises. It's us subjectively that chooses what one's good and what one's bad. And I realized at that moment in time, the mindfulness had been working because I woke up to the sound of roadworks and I wasn't frustrated by it. I just thought, well, I just accepted it, and I was somewhat grateful of it. And I realized that there was such a profound state change in just 12 weeks of meditation. There was an instant win after that.
The gap between stimuli and response is where your power lies, and they say, I can't remember who the professor who said this, but what separates us from animals is our ability to reason. Well, you would hope so anyway, but people are just reactive, right? Like an animal. So I always think whenever I hear maybe a comment or something I didn't like or whatever, I always try to catch myself, like there's that fluster of your neck again, like there's that emotional reaction, and try to separate yourself. And the more you can do that, you take back the power of control in terms of how you want to react to something. Obviously it's easier said than done, but yeah, like you mentioned, just being a lot more mindful of being like, this is just noise, this is just electrical information interpreted by my brain in terms of these the road work or the birds, and I can always choose how to react to it, right? Again, easier said than done, but anything worth having is never going to be easy, right? So it's an interesting point that you made.
There's a really great video on your YouTube. I think it's on your YouTube channel. Maybe you're a guest on it that I consumed a few months ago. Is it How to Be Focused or Deep Focus podcast? It's like 30 minutes long. And there's two things that I noted down weeks and weeks ago, actually from this, before I actually engaged with you to come on the podcast. There's two things that I've put down in my notes specifically from you that you said. and it was people don't lack focus, they lack solitude. I thought that was amazing. People need to check this video. I'll link in the show notes below. And how breakfast is also a fast from dopamine, essentially.
Yeah.
I think those 2 points, like you're speaking about how trying to, I don't think you said breakfast is a fast from dopamine, but you basically alluded like try and like remove dopamine, like cheap dopamine from your morning routine.
Yeah.
And people don't lack focus, they lack solitude. Two really great points. And if people want to check out that video, I'll put it in the show notes below. That was amazing, mate.
Cheers, fella. Yeah, no, I think that was one of the realizations for me. Like, it's not that I have ADHD. I just need to sit down long enough with this brain for it to calm down eventually and to have actually something to do with it in terms of a single task and no distractions and no other tabs up and no notifications, and train it, right? People get into these things and they beat themselves up because they don't get it straight away. And it's like, no amount of binaural beats or like, the getting things done framework is going to help you if you're not going to consistently train your mind, because it is like a muscle. Focus is like a muscle, I always say to the clients. So yeah, for me, that was a big realization. It's like, that's why I'm ready with my office space. It's like very, there's quite a ritual to it. Like, I really like having it clean and clutter free and making it as nice as I can be, because it's my solitude. This is where, I'm going to get into flow state. So I might as well enjoy it. So I found that if you can just better get into solitude, but how do you do that with open space offices and constantly connected? You could even say we're probably more cyborg than we are human with this, because it's just constantly on our hand. As soon as we leave the house, we check our phones, we check our pockets for our phones, and we have a heart attack if it's not with us. It's like we've lost a limb. So learning to stay away from that for a little bit whilst you're trying to get really, like, your best work will come from solitude. Your deep work, you'll tap into your full creative juices, and it's almost like a lost art. It's like people don't have solitude anymore. They think it's bad. I can't be by myself. I can't have these thoughts. And it's like, mate, that's where your power is in terms of creative outlet. It's just binaural beats in for an hour or two, and it's crazy what you can get done.
100%. Cal, are you familiar with Cal Newport?
I am, yeah.
Deep work. His definition of solitude is where you are removed from the input of other minds. And I think it spans beyond that, not just other minds, but just external sources. So like you said, your environment is conducive to that. If you have cables everywhere, subconsciously you're distracted by that, and that's kind of nitpicking at your focus.
Yeah, 100%. You have attention residue as well, like he speaks about. So whenever you switch between a task or you look at something that's maybe a bit messy, your attention, a slight bit of residue is left over unconsciously, right? So you're not fully, even though you feel like, I'm focusing on, I'm looking at the screen, you're not actually fully there in terms of all full cognition firing, right? Thank you.
I had Nir Eyal on the podcast. Have you heard his book, Indistractable?
I have his book. Which book do I have? I think it might be there's another book that came out. Hooked. That's it. I have that book.
He is a genius. Nir is brilliant. So in Indistractable and on the podcast, he spoke about how distraction doesn't actually really come from these rings and dings and external things on mobile phones. 90% of distraction comes from internal triggers. So that what he can have alluded to, what there are different emotions that you would face during a working flow or a workflow, which would be boredom, anxiety, right? And those emotions probably stem from your thoughts, right? So I think if you have uncomfortable thoughts that are popping up because you're not treating yourself to solitude, or you're not being mindful, they're altering your emotions, then your emotions are causing distraction. And then that's what I think leads to phone usage, because you're trying to comfort the internal triggers.
If you know,
it's like a value chain almost.
Yeah. Like, your thoughts affect your feelings affect your actions affect your life, and that's like chain reaction. You're 100% spot on. And I've always noticed, and everyone listening to this, whenever you go on your phone, notice when it is. Notice when you become distracted and you procrastinate, go for your phone. 9 times out of 10, it's when the task becomes difficult or unclear, if you are trying to get things done in that case, right? So I've noticed, for me, if I'm trying to write something or it's just difficult, I've hit a roadblock in something on my workflow, almost instinctively, like muscle memory, I'll go and pick up my phone, which is why I don't have my phone in my office, because I'm trying to detrain my brain, and I'm human, and I'm still susceptible to the world's smart psychologists who invent these things. It's not just innocent Silicon Valley geeks. It's really clever dudes, right? So again, it's about setting up constraints. So when the task inevitably becomes difficult for me, I'll notice that my brain is like trying to be like, go on YouTube, just go on it, like, because you want to have that comfort. You don't want to have that pain of just being sat there and bored and trying to get through this task. But which that's actually what you need to do. You need to push through. That's where you get those breakthroughs. So setting up also your digital environment as well. So your phone. I make it when I do have my personal phone as well. I make it so that Instagram is all the way to the right. So I'm adding that friction point of having to go all the way to the right, then click on Instagram if I really want to go in it, right? So that gives me enough time of my brain to be like, do you really need to do this right now? Or you're just doing it instinctively because you're bored. So the things you can do like that is setting up your digital environment as well. And of course, you can have app blockers as well. Some are good, some are not so good. You can break them. And then also on your desktop as well. I have something called distraction-free YouTube because I love YouTube. I love learning and stuff, but I also know I'm human again. If I'm gonna do a difficult task and then I need to, I get stuck in it, I need to set up my environment and set up constraints that I'm most likely to do the difficult task. So putting something like distraction-free YouTube, and there's other things you can get that are a bit more robust as well because you can turn that thing off. But again, I always think of thinking constraints. Think of setting up your environment so that the path of least resistance is the path that you want to take for your desired outcome. You make it so much more easier for yourself. And if you were in prison, and then you have no other option but to start reading because you're that bored, I'll read the Bible, whatever. Next thing you know, you go through books, and this happens to people who are in prison. They end up reading a ton of books and then want to change their career, and all because that constraint of just being sat there in solitary confinement was enough pain to be like, well, the pain of reading this book is less than being sat here. Right?
I've had 2 ex-offenders on my podcast who have said that exact thing. One gentleman was called Nick Yaris, who served 22 years on death row for a rape and murder that he didn't commit, and he became a scholar of every religion in the world before he was set free. The reason you might have seen, if people are tuning in on YouTube, the reason I kind of leaned over my laptop there was because the advice that you gave on your digital environment was absolutely epic. It was ace. And I've only recently designed mine just based on some of the things I've heard you say, some of the things Ali Abdul has said. And the reason I was reaching over was because I got a really good app blocker that is like mindfulness and app blocking combined.
Yeah.
It's called, and sorry for the listeners who are sitting and waiting for this. It's called OneSec. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I have it.
It's epic, isn't it? Because it makes you breathe. It makes you do breath work before it allows you to open the app.
Yeah, that little behavior change just right there is enough to start breaking that cycle. But yeah, also another good point you mentioned there is just, if you notice your breath throughout the day, you'll notice how stressed you are, anxious you are as well, just by coming in and checking in with your breath. I think that's also been quite not a hack, but just a small key change that if you can make a bit of conscious effort to do throughout the week, or just notice how your breath is, and you'll also notice like your state of being, and then you can change it right through your breath. But yeah, it's a great app, that OneSec.
Before, my next question is going to be all around digital environment and some of the apps that you use for your workflow. But before I do that, I want to add another quick life hack that I've implemented recently that I want to share. You use Todoist, right? I use TickTick, which are very similar apps.
Yeah.
The new iPhone update with the widget feature is phenomenal. So now my homepage, and I'm going to flash it on the screen for people looking on YouTube. I just have my screen time as the first widget. I then have my TickTick or my Todoist as the second widget, and then the third is my Google Calendar. Yeah. And like, there's no Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, or anything to be seen on that. So like the initial thing that I see when I log onto my phone is, shit, I've got these tasks today, or shit, I've got this appointment, or shit, I've been on my phone for 4 hours today. And I think that just gives me that cue. Catalyst for that. Yeah, that cue for the intent or distract framework that I use. I would totally recommend people kind of explore the widget feature or the widget features on an iPhone.
That was the big one for me, man, is the widget was the game changer, because it's all well and good having the best productivity system, but if you're not sticking to it, then it's the same as having no productivity system. So having that widget, for me, like when I train in the gym, I hate resting in the sense that I'm just kind of sat there, and I know I should just kind of sit there and rest. So what I do is I have similar to do. I just have the Todoist app up, and then between sets in the gym, I'll just start spinning off ideas. in terms of like content or like, you know, improving the coaching or collaborations or whatever it is, right? Just everything and anything. And because I've noticed I'm a bit more creative because the blood flow's going as well. And maybe the adrenaline as well. I'm just feeling like, you know, to write everything down. So I would really recommend, that's another hack we could probably add on to that widget is do between sets in the gym, and you'd be like, well, I came up with all these ideas, and then you get back to your desktop and then you can start to organize them. So it's like quite powerful.
That is juicy, mate. That is juicy. I'm going to implement that. Because what I do during my rest sets, I just walk and get my steps in because I sit sedentary most of the day. I just pace around the gym like an absolute psychopath.
You do the hand on hips, a certain dominance one.
like Ronaldo before a free kick.
I don't know why. Even I do, and I don't know why I do it. It's just comfortable.
There'll be some people listening to us, Alex, thinking, "What an absolute sack of losers!" Like talking about like the minutia of like optimization and total nerding out of it. But I'm so glad we can connect on this, mate, because I love fetishizing this stuff. I love it so much, and I'm glad that I can connect with it with you, mate. So digital workflow, right? I've heard you use the software Rise in the past. Can you explain what that is and any other tools that you might use in your arsenal?
Yeah, so rise.io is basically a tracking software that tracks where you spend your time on your computer. So in a document, on Notion, on a video editing software, on a tab on the internet, right? And you can categorize this yourself and then go in and customize it. So then you're like, well, actually, I'm actually doing work. I'm in this document. It's not procrastinating or whatever it is during Notion. I'm actually doing work. And it basically tracks your time on that, and it can break it down the day of the week, and it tells you how long you've been working throughout the day. So then it gives you a breakdown in terms of percentage as well, like how much time did you actually spend working here, and so you can get a tangible metric on how are you spending your time on your laptop. Are you really that productive, right? Are you really working 10 hours a day? You're actually working 2 hours a day, really, of deep, meaningful work, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. Like to really get in like 2, 3, 4 hours of deep, meaningful work is like amazing. But to say when people are like, oh, I'm grinding 12 hours a day shifts, it's like, you're not, because we use the rise.io and you can see. So that's a really good way if you want to get tangible of like, hang on a minute, how much fat can I trim off here? Like how streamlined can I get in terms of my productivity? On the flip side, it's important not to kind of go down the rabbit hole of being like super productive. I'm going to push myself to 12-hour days because I'm not a big advocate of that. I'm an advocate of balance as well, even as entrepreneurs, even as people, as peak performers, like you need that balance. So, but yeah, that's how I would use Rise. And then of course we use Endel. I think do you know what Endel is? Did we mention that? Okay, cool. Endel is giving all the golden nuggets away here. Endel is like Brain FM.
Is it almost like binaural beats that kind of play music adaptive to what you're working on?
Exactly, yeah. But Endel is like Brain FM for the listeners listening on steroids. That's what Endel is like to me, because you can actually hook that up to your Apple Watch or Oura Ring in this case, and it will match the BPM of the music to your heart rate. So it kind of meet you where you are. So then if based off you have circadian rhythm, you have an ultradian rhythm as well. And this is also like your appetite, your mood. So it would go in line with your ultradian rhythm. So it will meet you where you are, and it will tell you like, okay, you're coming up on in terms of energy. It's good to go and do some work. So Endel's really good for that. That's what I use. And the beats, I just really like the beats. You can use relax, you can use focus, and it's just a really cool app. I really like it. And you can use sleep ones as well for Endel. Some of our clients love the sleep stuff, the sleep soundscapes, for getting asleep. But yeah, Endel, I use that whilst I'm focused in, and I'll time my kind of work sessions with Endel. So I've got the work block, I've already planned out my week, I know exactly what I need to do. I've got my office, no one's distracting me, and then I've got those binaural beats in which you don't have to use them, but I really like them. It adds like that extra cue for me. And then I'll have my decaf coffee, which is like a taste cue as well, to be like, hey, it's go time. And you can also use smell as well. I sometimes use incense sticks as well to help. Like, right, we're going to get a good session in here. So that's how I really like get myself zoned in terms of software. So Todoist, Endel, Rise, and that's about it. I'm a guy with minimum effective dose. I like just the simple systems. I don't like using loads of apps, so I just like to use those three. But yeah, that's my setup.
That's sick, man. I'm nerding out. I really am nerding out. The
Oh,
Aura ring,
can't forget Notion.
oh, Notion is a game
Fucking
changer as
brain.
well. One thing that I haven't invested in that I like the idea of is the Aura ring. Is that like
Mhm.
a sleep heart rate? What kind of data do you focus on with that?
Yeah, so people always say to me like, "Hey, what's better, Whoop or Aura?" Because they're both fitness trackers or health trackers. You can have an Apple smartwatch as well. And I always say, don't use Aura as an all day tracker. Like, don't use it as like a step tracker. It's actually quite inaccurate. I wouldn't use it as a fitness tracker because you're going to damage the ring as well if you're using weights and stuff. I think Whoop takes on that one. But for us on our like on my program that I run, we don't work with you unless you have an Oura ring. Like, oh, like, we'll get the Oura ring for you, right? You need to have the Oura ring, right, for you to get the best results. So we say that because we're really big on sleep, and so I say to people, if you want to really get your sleep dialed in and look at the metrics, go with Aura. Even over Whoop, I would personally argue. I just also like the form factor of a ring. It's easy for me to keep on. I don't like things around my wrist, especially when I'm sleeping. So I would say Aura is the better sleep tracker. Think of it as a sleep tracker, not a fitness tracker, which can be advertised as. I would say it's just primarily a sleep tracker, and it does that very well.
I love it. I want to. I know I've stole over an hour of your time already. This hour's flown in. We've just been geeking
It's
out.
all good. We're in the
I want to
groove.
talk about. I want to talk about sleep because I know that's your kind of USP. Besides feeling tired and drowsy, what effect does poor sleep have on your lifestyle?
Yeah, well, just start with the list, but I think the biggest ones is, of course, lack of focus, appetite regulation, willpower, um, ability to think critically, more susceptible to stress. There's just so much. You're more susceptible to all kind of diseases as well. Weight gain, everything, poorer decisions as well. So like, well, that's related to willpower, but yeah, decision fatigue. It's just all tied in. Like, if there's one thing, like if you could put sleep in pill form, it'd be the world's best selling supplement. And but it's free and people aren't still taking it. It's like, it's insane the benefits you can get from this, from sleep. And people are like, yeah, yeah, sure, I know. But like, if you really dial it in and you got yourself an aura ring or something similar, and got consistently high sleep scores, and got quite not religious, because you don't have to give up your life to be having a good evening routine, but just got, non-negotiable with the evening routine, and start seeing that as sacred. Like, you know what, 9 p.m. is a non-negotiable cutoff time. I don't care if the client needs my help. Like, I've got to put myself first, and then I can help the clients later that day, or just leave them a holding message. Just leave enough time to put yourself first and get that sleep, because the effects as well are subtle. So people are like, I'm not sleep deprived, but I think there's Matthew Walker. It's like, getting 7 hours of sleep for more than 7 consecutive days causes an entire day of sleep deprivation, of symptoms of sleep deprivation. And how many people in jobs and that are sleeping on 6, 7 hours, right? And boasting about it. I only got 5 hours of sleep last night and I'm here. And it's like, mate, it's idiotic. You need to, like, you're doing yourself harm, right? It's nothing to be boastful about. But and it's like, coming back to the point of, it's subtle. So people don't, when a client comes to me and they're like, I want to be able to focus on my business, but I just get distracted. And they think it's like environment thing, and it might well be. Oftentimes, man, it's just about getting that sleep really dialed in, and it's kind of solves the issue by itself. They have the willpower to push through and to focus on that thing for long enough. So sleep is really the foundation to everything. You can get the best routines, you can get the best productivity hacks, you can get the best supplements, you can biohack as much as you like. But if your sleep is not foundationally solid, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your money. So that's why we're just big proponents of it, of doing that thing first. So yeah, the negative effects, man, are just too long of a list to even to stay off, but they're definitely there.
I admired listening to you talk about the low hanging fruit when it comes to improving your sleep. And I think you noted, and I might get this wrong, light, temperature, noise, and clutter.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Light, temperature, noise. You can do clutter, but yeah, I think the big three. Humans remember things in threes easier.
So, what can you do with both light, temperature, and noise to optimize your sleep?
Awesome. So with light, the main thing is you want to get that room as pitch black as possible. Blackout blinds, if you can't get them, get yourself a good quality eye mask, like a good quality one that doesn't sit on the eyelids so you don't wake up from discomforts. And of course, LED lights emitted from your Wi-Fi, which should be turned off actually when you're going to bed. You want to avoid EMFs. But yeah, LEDs, so your fire alarm, cover them up with black electrical tape, and you want the room completely pitch black. And when it comes to light as well, leading up to bedtime, you want to start avoiding blue light. So you can get Philips Hue bulbs that we have, and just kind of what we call like biohack your house. So then you start having your whole house can go red by just a flip of a button on the app, and you can schedule that up as well. So at 6 p.m. it starts to go red. That's what we do. And then what you can also do as well, if you have, like, say, your bathroom or maybe a part of the house that is not very easy to install, these Edison bulbs, the fitting, you can get these motion sensor red lights, so that when you walk in, they turn on, you do your business, the kitchen, the toilet, you walk out, it turns off. So there's loads of ways you can start manipulating light to start, improving your circadian rhythm and improving your sleep. So light is, go on, you gonna say something?
Yeah. I heard you say, I might be getting this wrong, that your skin has light sensors or something like that.
Your
What does
skin
that
can
mean?
sense light. Yeah. So it's obviously these sensors, I can't remember the name of them, but they're obviously highly concentrated within your eye, but also your skin, right? So if a client is traveling and they're going through a time zone, we're trying to mitigate the effects of jet lag, wear a hoodie, hide that skin, and it goes that far. So yeah, it goes that far into it. So yeah, definitely on your skin.
Amazing. That's blown my mind. What about temperature then?
Yeah, so we generally want to have a cool room, around 18 degrees, although there is no set number, but they typically say the general consensus is about 18 degrees, but there is no set number, everybody's different. But generally speaking, the cooler the room, the better. And you will find that unless you are measuring your room temperature, your room's probably not cool enough. Get the first thing is obviously get that room ventilated with nice clean air, fresh air, and obviously cool it down. And that will allow you to basically enter deeper states of sleep. So you've got your REM sleep and your deep sleep. So we know that as well. If the room is not regulated correctly in terms of temperature, you don't get in deeper storage states of sleep because your body is quite scared. Is in a sense, so what happens is your body is protecting itself. So when you go into states of like REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, your body's ability to regulate its temperature is dampened, or in some sense even switched off. So if the room is too hot, then it's not obviously going to allow you to get into that deeper state of restorative sleep, because it needs to regulate its temperature to remain alive, right? So getting your room as cool as you possibly can is the best way. If you don't have if you can't get your room cool enough through your windows and whatnot, what you can do is make the investment of something like an 8 Pod Pro or an 8 Sleep Pod Pro, which is basically a fancy mattress cover which cools down your mattress, and it's side dependent. So if you've got you've got a partner, you can have one hot, one cold. That's what I do, because Amy, I think women in general, they love to have their bed really hot. But I run really hot, so then we're always arguing because I might take the covers off, and she's like, "No, I want to get rid." So like having that issue sorted with an 8 Pod has been a godsend. So yeah, temperature is the big one here. So we can even go down to the sheets as well. So you want your thread count to be about, I think it's off the top of my head, like 200 to 400 thread count. That's right, yeah, 200 to 400 thread count of like organic cotton, the most breathable. Avoid silk and all that stuff. So yeah, you want breathability and you want temperature, and you can do it with the pillow covers, your mattress, of course, as well. Like, get a good quality mattress. You spend a third of your life in bed, about 25 years. You might as well make the investment there, right? So yeah, it goes that far into it. And I think in terms of, are you happy with that? Do you want me to go more? We can go to.
Mate, I think the listeners have got so many notes. They'll be like rampantly like writing down on their notes folder on Notion.
Yeah. So
What about
noise as
noise?
well. Yeah, so
Noise.
noise. The main one with noise, man, is just getting some earplugs, right? That's number one. But what we use as a company, and I'm not endorsed by any of these companies at all, is called Happy Ears. They're the best earplugs I've found that actually fit in and relatively stay in. Sometimes they fall out. The next best thing to do, if you don't have earplugs, you just don't like them, get yourself a white noise box that plays like a droning, consistent noise, like a fan or something, and your brain will eventually get used to that noise, and it will kind of block it out, and that will help block out other noises, so like your neighbors or the birds or the busy street if you live in London, and that will help cancel out those noise. I like to do sometimes both as well. Where I live, we have the window open, and the birds in the morning are just so loud. even to the point that it's not enough for headphones. So what you can do is compound that with a white noise box and your headphones, and then no one's going to disturb you. But yeah, you want to make set up your bedroom ideally to the point that you're not going to be disturbed in terms of noise. You don't want, like, if you have like roommates or something, or you really don't want any noise. Or like a common one is the partner comes in like an hour later, and it's just like that's the worst thing for sleep. So one of the ways you can get around that in terms of when you are in bed is using separate duvet covers. That also stops the transference of heat and also prevents them being touching each other and making each other uncomfortable. So there's loads of things you can go into with sleep. And another one before I shut up is EMFs as well. So EMFs are rife within the bedroom, like around the wall sockets. They run through electromagnetic fields. So we know that this has a negative effect on our body, because our body is quite literally charged as well with our heart. So you want to get rid of these negative charges. And there's some research out on this now. It's quite new. It sounds quite woo-woo, but they've looked at this. Have you heard of grounding?
Is that where you basically go onto grass with your socks and shoes off?
Yeah. It looks really hippie, but there's actually some science behind it, and some solid science as well. And it's the same kind of premise here. You want to remove, like when you're traveling as well, you're kind of attached with EMFs. So you want to rid them. So after you've landed, get yourself out on some barefoot and just walk around for a little bit, and that will help rid them and help with your sleep and stress and whatnot. So coming back to the bedroom, if you have EMFs all through your plug sockets, pull your bedroom head around at least 12 inches away from your wall, and that will help mitigate that. And of course, switch off your phone, switch off your Wi-Fi. And you could go a step further and get something like an earthing mat or a grounding mattress for your bed, which will help with the negative charges as well. But there's loads you can do, man. But those three ones are the main ones: sleep, noise, temperature, light.
And I guess all these suggestions that you've given, like the full panel of suggestions there, Alex, and people listening will have like a sliding scale of how much of this they want to implement. If we were to go back to light, temperature, and noise, and you were to recommend one purchase across each factor, what would it be, like between light, temperature, and noise?
Okay, so for light,
or purchase or change, sorry.
Yeah, so for light, if it just had to be one thing, blackout blinds, for sure. Maybe if you could tie that with blue light blocking glasses, one of those two. Depends, because if you're on about the bedroom, blackout blinds. If you're talking about your evening routine, which is just as important, blue light blocking glasses to really help minimize that. And we're talking about we'll go with temperature. So in terms of temperature, I would say one thing. It's not really something you have to invest in at all, but just open your windows. Simple as open your windows. That will help cool the room down. That will help ventilate it, get nice fresh air in as well. We want that air quality high. We want that oxygen high. And then noise, I would say, it's a tricky one. I would probably go with, it depends on the person. I would go with earplugs, because that's more, you can travel with that more, right? You can't really travel with a white noise box, although you can get apps on your phone. But again, I don't recommend sleeping with your phone next to your head. Even with airplane mode off, I don't trust those things. But yeah, that's what I would recommend, those big three.
On the noise one, I thought you were about to recommend, if your girlfriend comes in an hour later, break up with her. That'll be the low-hanging fruit.
You could do that. Yeah, but then you'd be lonely. That's not very good.
Find a girl or find a partner or find a boy that works the same shift patterns as you. Sorted.
Yeah. Well, that's what me and my girlfriend do. We're always on the same shift patterns.
I love it. Those three factors of advice are amazing, mate. Just quickly on energy and sleep, one last question I want to ask about is why you shouldn't start your day with morning coffee.
Awesome. I think I made a YouTube on this. So the reason you don't want to start your day with morning coffee is because when you've woken up in the morning, your adenosine system, your energy system, is essentially not fully online yet, in a sense, right? Your cortisol, which is what wakes you up in the morning, the stress hormone, is still doing its job. Now, what releases cortisol, or what helps encourage the release or the secretion of cortisol, is light. So what also releases cortisol is caffeine, adrenaline, right? So what people are doing, as soon as they wake up, you're already having this natural rise in cortisol, but then you're effectively interfering with that with caffeine. Okay, so you get this double spike in cortisol. So then you get this drop later. And what that's going to look like in terms of mood is basically you can refer to this as the caffeine crash. Sometimes at like 1, 2, 3 p.m. you feel like low energy. You're like, I need another cup of coffee, and people often do that, and you're just stuck in this perpetual cycle of caffeine. So the better thing to do, and you actually get more of the effect from caffeine by doing so, is wait at least 2 hours after awakening. And now for some people that can be very difficult. I need my morning coffee. Okay, got you. So what I would recommend is have something like an electrolyte drink. If you just want to make a homemade one, you can just have some like rock salt or Celtic sea salt with some lemon. That'll do the job. But obviously, some people don't like the taste of that, so you can just get yourself some electrolyte drinks, which are actually really tasty. Have that in the morning instead. Then once you do have your coffee after 2 hours, your cortisol will be nice and flattened out. So your body will actually going to respond better to the caffeine, and your adenosine system, your energy system is going to be hydrated from the electrolytes, so you're going to be fully switched on. So when you do have that caffeine, you are going to feel it, and you're going to feel it even more so without the caffeine crash. What I would also recommend when you are having caffeine is take it with 200 milligrams of L-theanine. That will really help. That's amino acid. That will really help with the kind of sometimes people can get jitteriness or anxiousness from caffeine. That will help basically soothe that. And green tea naturally has that in, which is why green tea is also a great substitute for coffee, because it gives you that kind of clean energy without any of the jitteriness or the caffeine crash that you can sometimes get. So that's my recommendation of why you should avoid having coffee first thing in the morning. Just wait a little bit, delay gratification. You'll feel it even more so. It's actually a win-win.
Solid sound advice, Alex. The listeners' shopping list will be like 3 tabs long at the moment. I love it. I'm gonna recap this and take so many notes myself. I'm gonna close up on a couple funny, not funny questions, but could be classed as funny questions. A lot of the effects of what we have spoken about today in terms of biohacking result in improved testosterone. One of the tasks or one of the internet facets that also promote testosterone, or at least online articles show this, is and it's so topical because we're on the 30th of November, is no nut November or no fap.
Yeah.
Is this something? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's mixed views on this, and I am actually more on the side of no fap, actually, having done this myself as well, and looked profusely on the research. And there's actually not much research on it. There was one study or a few studies that showed that testosterone actually dropped after 7 days of basically not busting your nut. But then that is not like a long-term study either, so we don't know the full details of it, the full effects, right? We don't know if testosterone comes back up after maybe 14 days or anything. So I would say the devil is in the dosage here. So if you're jacking off every day, you're not going to feel great, because that's an easy dopaminergic spike. You're not working hard for that reward, right? You want to wire your brain to work hard, then reward. That's how dopamine is supposed to work. Because of wave phones, and because of obviously we have porn as well, that's just easy. And even jacking off as well, that's just easy. That's an easy behavior. That's an easy dopamine, right? So the more you do that, the more you're going to revert to doing that behavior, because it's just easy. It's like pressing a button. In a sense, that's going to cause addiction to that. So if you're doing that every day, every single day, that's going to for sure have an effect on your self-esteem as well, because with that can come shame as well. If you're watching porn all the time, that can come shame. And I think they taught this in sex education, that watching porn is normal and healthy, and I completely disagree with that personally. I think you should completely stay away from that, and it's like the devil's work in terms of a man's drive and initiative. If he's always got that easy access at the end of the day when he's lonely, he's naturally going to default to that, and I think that can kill a lot of your motivation for the next day as well, personally. And we've had clients as well come to us with genuine like porn addictions as well. It's actually quite a common thing amongst men, and they don't want to talk about it, but it's real, and it's almost robbing you of your energy. You want to reserve that energy for the difficult task and channel it into something, that sexual energy. There's a lot of Eastern cultures that spoke about that you would actually channel it, and it's better to reserve from it. And you had athletes like Mike Tyson and whatnot who wouldn't have sex with his wife for the whole year and whatnot, and that's a different thing. But I do think there's some utility in there, absolutely, to reserve it. Thank you. Go on.
And what I think it does, similar to sex or love, it releases oxytocin as well.
Yeah.
But no one to bond that with. So
Yeah.
you have the instant spike of dopamine, you release oxytocin, you have no one to share that with. So then the dopamine just does the opposite and comes all the way down like a come down.
Yeah. So you know, those chemicals are used for bonding, and women actually get that more in terms of when they have when they orgasm with a partner, they'll release more oxytocin, which is why they get more attached to the guy. Which we're going off rails, but it's an interesting fact. And I think, you know, these are powerful neurochemicals, and if you're going to abuse them, you know, they're going to bite back. And I'd say the answer in terms of like, well, what's the correct thing? Like, do we do 30 days no fap? Like, it depends on the person. I think if you've got a real addiction and a real problem here, it might, you know, a big problem requires like a big solution, or like, you know, an extreme problem requires an extreme solution. There might be some utility again to go for like maybe as long as you can in terms of a streak of avoidance, and keeping an accountability partner, and trying to knock it on the head, because at the end of the day, I think it is robbing you of your energy. That's also time wasted as well. And, you know, you release a ton of prolactin when you orgasm. That's why you feel like, oh, I don't feel like doing anything. You feel lazy. You don't really want to do anything, right? So if you're doing that continuously, of course, you're not going to be as driven, I think, in terms of like throughout the weeks to do things. I really do think it adds up. And I think it's also like a good mental battle to like, how much can you really control your urges and desires here? Like, who's in control here of the driver's seat? Like, is it you, or is it, you know, is it just your pleasures, right? Or can you abstain from that? Like, you know what? No, we're going to be better than that. I know how difficult it is, but I'm the captain of the ship, and I'm going to control what I do with my energy, my time, and not just my dick, right? So there's certain ways you can frame it, and there's not a lot of science on it that backs it up, but I think there's no harm in trying. And I think, generally speaking, it's less is more. Definitely just try to limit it for sure. Porn, absolutely get rid of that. But jacking off, like every now and again, I'm sure, you know, that's probably quite, could you say, normal, or, you know, understandable. But do try to avoid it, because it's often going to be compounded with porn, because you've got a mobile phone in your hand, you're lonely, you're like, oh, fuck it, I'll just do that. Next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole and you can't get out, and it's causing you social anxiety because you have like maybe perhaps unconscious shame and stuff. So don't play with fire in that sense. I think it's just best to actually see the challenge of, I'm going to abstain from this, and with that kind of comes a sense of pride as well, because like, I'm a man that actually has control of my urges, and that might exude itself in social situations and stuff. So again, I think there's some use to it for sure. I think it's a good thing to do, especially for young guys.
Perfect advice, Alex. I believe I am totally in your corner on that aspect, and I think it's one of those factors where you can apply that intent or distract framework once again. Are you doing it with intent, or are you doing it to distract yourself from the product, like the productivity that you need to face that day, or the obstacles that you need to overcome that day? And it's quite funny that we're two kind of straight guys talking about the female orgasm, and that's how we're almost ending this podcast. I want to end on one other funny question, and it's just to bring light to this whole conversation, because it's been a very serious conversation on biohacking. I watched the video of you and the boys that I mentioned earlier, Mo Samuels and Tom Stockton, work out with a shock collar.
Oh God!
A couple of years ago. Yeah. Is that a new biohacking technique, wearing a shocking dog collar while training?
Funny you mention it, David. No, you know, they were awesome days, man. And part of me wishes I was like 5 years younger when we started that, because I think I would have stuck at it more. But just where I was at in terms of my own life and journey and my career as well, with my own coaching, we had to kind of let that chapter go with the silly stuff, because it was great fun. But I was like, if I'm going to be, you know, an authoritative, lead by example coach, I also believe in, like, you know, your actions need to do the words, and I couldn't have walking around with a dog collar. Like, as funny as it is, we had to let that go. But yeah, we don't have that in the program, unfortunately.
I can't imagine you do. But those videos were so light-hearted. I loved watching those back in the day. But Alex, this has been this has been amazing. We've really connected, and we've nerded out for 90 minutes that have probably felt like 20 minutes to me. Thank you for stopping by, mate. Like I said, I was a fan of your content. I consumed it before I had a podcast a couple of years ago, and it's so good that we've connected, became mates, and delivered this 90-minute podcast for the world. If people want to get in touch with you and your program and get on board with Goldilox and just stay up to date with what you're up to, where can people find you?
So the platform that I'm most active on is Instagram, of course. for most people. YouTube, we've just recently started that, and that's going very well, and we're going to be more active on that. And of course, if anyone wants to work with me, Goldilox.zone, just visit that website, have a look, see what we're about, see if it's for you. If it is, awesome, get on a call, have a chat, see if it's for you. If it's not, that's fine. Or you could email me at alex@goldilox.zone. But honestly, Dave, it's been a pleasure, man. It's a great conversation, and thanks for being an OG supporter and liking my stuff. I really appreciate it. And that's one of the powerful things as well that is often doesn't get spoken about, and social media gets a lot of hate, but you know how it destroys brains. But it also does bring people, like-minded people, together, right? It depends how you use it, right? It's a tool, and you've got to govern that. So yeah, it's awesome to connect like this, man, and to have that power do this. So thanks for having me, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been good fun. Let's do this face to face at some point.
For sure, brother. Absolutely. I'll hold you to that.